Okay, I think we are ready to go. So today this is our Optimum Wellness Lecture Series. This is our third installment, I believe, for our season. And today we're very pleased to bring you an expert in cognitive care. Dr. Freitag is a licensed psychologist and board-certified neuropsychologist with 17 years of experience in diagnosis and treatment of individuals with various neuromedical conditions, including dementia, stroke, and traumatic brain injury. Dr. Freitag has a private practice in Walnut Creek for the past 14 years and is also the founder and president of We Care Senior Living Advisors, a premier senior placement service serving older residents and their families in Contra Costa County. And I just have to know, I can't tell you how much good feedback I've been getting over the last few weeks that we have Dr. Freitag here with us. So he is our Contra Costa celebrity. In this presentation, Dr. Freitag will go over the most common and practical senior care options. He will also provide tips and resources for aging in place as long as we can. This lecture is also sponsored by the Rossmoor Fund. They're not here with us today that I can see, but we've got all their information in the counseling office. The Rossmoor Fund is a resident-run board dedicated to helping residents in financial need with one-time financial emergency events. I think that's it, so I want to welcome Dr. Freitag. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, let's keep this over. Thank you. All right, good morning. I would also add, if you are watching this in the future on Rossmoor TV and you have any questions, I'll have my email up on the final slide and you can email me with any questions that you might have. So let me just jump right into what we're going to talk about. I do have to kind of coordinate two different presentations here. Okay, so disclosures. So a little bit about me. Just want to check, is that camera, is it, you can see, okay, good. So I am the president and founder of We Care Senior Living Advisors. So that is one hat that I wear. That's a new service to Contra Costa where I help seniors and their families find appropriate senior communities that best fit their care, wellness needs. I'm also the president and founder of the Mount Diablo Memory Center. So that's another hat that I wear, and the Mount Diablo Memory Center is a comprehensive neuropsychology practice. It's located here in Walnut Creek, where I provide neuropsychology services to individuals who are experiencing some sort of neurological or neuromedical condition, whether it be a traumatic brain injury, stroke, or more commonly what I do is work with older adults who maybe have concerns with dementia and provide diagnostic assessments and recommendations for care and treatment. I'm board certified in neuropsychology, and I'm also the commissioner of the Advisory Council on Aging of Contra Costa County and the Walnut Creek representative. But today, all the opinions are my own, so I'm not here on behalf of the Advisory Council on Aging. So what will we talk about today? So I'm going to give a brief rundown and probably review for most of you on senior living. So Senior Living 101, what are the different options that are available to us as we age and may need some more care and support. We'll also discuss deciding on appropriate care level, and that's probably one of the more common questions that I get clinically, like what is the most appropriate level of care, what's the most appropriate level of services. We will discuss payment options, and there are individuals that are surprised to find that they do have some options that were maybe not known to them or available to them that can help offset some of the care costs. And then we will talk about 3 tips for choosing a senior living community, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. So Senior Living 101. So I really tend to look at senior living as kind of a hierarchy. Now there's a lot of overlap between different levels of care, but I kind of look at it as far as the lowest care needs to no care needs at all to more maximal care needs. First of all, you have independent living at home. Rossmoor is a good example of that, or just living out in the community where you live at home and you're independent and enjoying your life. There's also other levels of care, independent living in a senior community. Then you have in-home care, continuing down the hierarchy. And then you have what are called residential care facilities for the elderly, or RCFEs. And these cover both assisted living and board and care communities. And then you have memory care, which is also a type of RCFE, but that's just a higher level of care being offered. And then finally, you have skilled nursing facilities. So we're going to talk about each one of these. So the first one is independent living at home. So in this type of situation, the older resident is fully independent for all activities of daily living. The home is appropriate in both layout and setup to safely support independent living. And this not only includes your home setup, but also what the neighborhood composition is. Do you have friendly neighbors that help you out? So for example, in our neighborhood, we have some older adults, and it's very common one of us will help bring out the garbage cans because those are sometimes a little bit wieldy. And so it's helpful that the neighbors are able to provide that type of assistance. But also has a home set up and also around the home in the yard as far as fall prevention. Are there a lot of stairs? Are there a lot of maybe out of control roots? How well lit is it? So there's lots of things to consider to safely continue to live independently at home. What's the overall setup of the home? And really, someone that can continue to safely live at home has pretty minimal and reasonable supports for home upkeep and independent living. So it's reasonable that there might be yard care, housekeeping, and other types of services. Then the next level is independent living in a community. And really this is for an older resident that's fully independent for all activities of daily living, but they really desire a maintenance-free lifestyle. So that's the individual where, it's hard to maintain a home, right? You have the gutters to clean and the squirrels to keep out of your attic and the yard to maintain, and at some point it's just easier for that maintenance-free lifestyle. And in this case, an independent living community is probably appropriate. Some independent living communities may offer continuing levels of care. So there are different models. One model is rentals that are with and without a transition to care level. So that's you pay a basic rent, and then there might be some care fees on top of that. And then they may or may not offer then further levels of care in that community. Another model is what's called a continuing care retirement communities, and these are becoming more and more popular over the last 10 to 15 years, where you pay at the front end, you pay sometimes a very sizable deposit, and that deposit is basically like your insurance to then be able to stay within that CCRC, and they will provide the increasing levels of care for you so you can continue to age in place, at least within that environment. The next level is in-home care. In-home care are non-medical care and assistance with activities of daily living. So your activities of daily living, it sounds just like what they are, but from a medical or clinical perspective, we're looking at more basic activities such as hygiene, nutrition and meals, fall assistance, assistance with meal preparation, medications, and other sort of basic activities that might come up throughout the day. And then kind of within activities of daily living, you also have what are called your instrumental activities of daily living. And those are the more complex activities that might be associated with day-to-day living, such as managing your finances, paying your bills, going grocery shopping, driving, so more kind of complex activities. Well, in-home care can certainly provide assistance with your basic ADLs, and sometimes they also provide assistance with instrumental activities of daily living as well. A care attendant is paid an hourly or daily rate, and there's really a couple of different options that you can go to hire or secure in-home care. One is working with the care agency, which I generally tend to prefer and recommend for a couple of reasons. One is that they're licensed, bonded, and insured, and the caregivers are background checked, at least generally, as far as every agency that I've worked with, they are. And they also have to follow California labor laws. And this can be a big issue, because if you do go the independent contractor route, while generally they are less expensive than an agency, oftentimes they're not bonded or insured. And also, you still have to follow California labor laws. So there has been some issues with well-meaning families and older residents paying for independent contractor, maybe a friend or somebody they found on Craigslist. And that independent contractor would work for more than 8 hours per day, but they would just continue to pay them their hourly rate. Well, if you work for more than 8 hours per day, what kicks in? Overtime. And so then they would get sued for not paying their overtime time and a half rates, and it caused them to get in a little bit of trouble. Excuse me 1 second. All right. Next down the hierarchy of care is what's called residential care facilities for the elderly, our RCFEs. RCFEs cover what's commonly referred to as assisted living. And assisted living really has kind of an interesting history. So the assisted living model, the care model, has really changed due to market forces really over about the past 30 or 40 years. So traditionally, people would think about assisted living, and in their mind, they would think, well, nursing home, right? This stark white walls, staff and nursing are white, orderly scrubs, no sort of stimulation or activities, and the elderly residents just sitting in a wheelchair. And that's the way it kind of used to be in many communities. Well, right around the time my parents, baby boomers, started to have to work with their parents, they recognized that this is not the way it should be. Like, if we age and we want to be in a community that's going to take care of us, we want to be comfortable. We want it to be at least elegant, or at the very least provide us with basic care needs in a setting that feels like home. And so the market forces really changed this model to now where you have assisted living, which many are just wonderful, elegant, comfortable, home-like environments. And I know clinically when I'm working with patients and we're talking about different care options, that can sometimes be a roadblock, because in their mind they say, well, my mom was in a nursing home and it was a horrible experience. And I was like, well, when was the last time you visited assisted living? Well, probably 30 years ago when my mom was there. And I'm like, well, let's take a look at some of these different communities. Just even within Central Contra Costa, there are some wonderful options for assisted living. So these really provided older residents with care options in a home-like environment. They provide non-medical services, and they provide support for your activities of daily living. There's different amenities such as activities, exercise facilities, 24-hour care staff, transportation, etc. Generally, the facility size ranges from 16 beds to over 100 beds. And then also within the RCFE care model is what are called boarding cares. Boarding cares are actually single-family homes, and they're typically around 6 beds, but they can get up to as high as 16 beds if the facility is large enough, but typically 6 beds in a single-family home. And they will provide assistance with ADL activities that are similar to assisted living. But the options for different activities may not be as robust because you're in a home with just 5 or 6 other residents. There are over 300 boarding care homes within Contra Costa County. All told, of RCFEs, there's over 400 RCFE communities within Contra Costa County. Typically, a resident in a boarding care, not always, but typically, they'll have a bit higher care needs. And because of that, there's a higher staff ratio than what you would get in assisted living. So the staff ratio is 1 to 3 generally of staff to residents. And then finally on the hierarchy is you have nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities. So residents receive medically supported living services. They're 24-hour nurse support. Medical insurance will cover these services for a limited period of time because they are medically necessary. And to be in a nursing home requires a doctor's order. So a nursing home, or what's called a skilled nursing facility, or SNF, or SNF for short. I forgot to mention, going back to slides, and I think one of my slides got omitted. Under the RCFE model, then you have assisted living, boarding care, and then you have memory care. And memory care is just specialized assisted living for residents with dementia, and there's typically a higher staff to care ratio, and the activities are more appropriate to an individual that may be experiencing some sort of cognitive decline. And then typically in a memory care, you have what's called delayed egress. I mean, it's not locked. They're not a locked facility, but in order to get out, you have to either use a punch code, which the staff have, or hold the door handle for 15 seconds, and then it will open, and typically there's an alarm. So that keeps the resident safe and secured within their environment. All right, so one of the more common questions that I get are, how do you decide on the appropriate level of care? So rather than me drone on about different facts and data, I thought we would just use a pretend individual. This is Ray, and this is Ray's journey in senior living. This is a real individual, but this is stock photos, nobody that I know. And this isn't based on any actual patient or anything like that. This is just typical of what I might see in my clinical practice and then also with We Care Senior Living. So Ray's 72 years old. He's a retired college professor. He's divorced, and he has 2 adult sons living in Southern California. The last one I feel is, as far as the sons living in Southern California, is, I feel, significant. I always try to ask what families in the area, because typically older residents tend to fare a little bit better as they age when the kids are close by. And so it makes me think, okay, what sort of resources are we going to have to line up to help bridge that gap between the kids living, at least a plane ride away versus what sort of support they might need in a crisis. So Ray's doing well. He's enjoying his retirement. He loves traveling, gardening, exercise, different social groups. He lives in a modest split-level home, and he is generally in good health. Typical Rossmoorian, right? Loves retirement, loves the activities. Maybe might see Ray on the golf course. So what is the appropriate level of care for Ray? What would you guys think? Independent living, right? Easy one, no problem. Ray's doing fine, and he's enjoying life. All right, well, we've gone, a few years down the road, and Ray is now 86. He's still enjoying retirement, but some health conditions are starting to take effect. He has arthritis and degenerative disc disease, have all but eliminated his ability to work in his yard. It's getting harder and harder for him to get up and down the stairs, and his home is getting harder to maintain. For example, he no longer feels confident going up a ladder. Just as a funny aside, I'm now the proud owner of about 5 or 6 different ladders because my dad, who's in his mid-70s, finally gave them to me on my last trip up home. They live up in Washington State. And he's very aware of it because he can still probably do okay, but I wouldn't want him up on ladders. But he's very aware of it because my grandfather, he fell off a ladder, and that was like a major issue that really started his downward decline in health as an older adult. But I get the benefits now of having 5 or 6. So if you need a ladder, you know where to get a hold of me. So what is the appropriate level of care for Ray? Assisted living, possibly. What, does anybody else have a different opinion? I assume that's your wife next to you? Or I saw her shaking her head, so I thought. Independent living? Yeah, independent. So you can probably still live independently. In retirement community. So Rossmoor might be an appropriate type of setting for him for sure, or independent living in a community setting, like a CCRC. So this is Ray. He's probably at this point where he really needs that maintenance-free lifestyle. So he doesn't have to deal with and worry about the house. He can continue to enjoy his retirement. So now Ray's aging. He's 80. He's been in independent living now, so he moved to an independent living community for the past 4 years. And the son, last visit, noticed that Ray's medications were not getting filled. He has no difficulties managing his activities of daily living, so hygiene, nutrition, remembering to take his medications is going fine. Just getting them filled has been an issue. He has increasingly unsteady gait and did have a fall in the shower recently. So what is the appropriate level of care for Ray at this point? Assisted living, I would say so, yeah. So he can still manage them, but he needs a little more help, maybe a little assistance with showering to make sure he doesn't fall, make sure that his medications are getting filled and delivered to him. So I think some assisted living with some basic care is an appropriate next step for Ray. All right, so Ray's aging. Now we're about 10 years into our journey, and he has been, in assisted living for the past 3 years. He was diagnosed with mild dementia at age 82. The staff has reported to the sons that Ray is not making it to meals 100% of the time. He does okay, though, if he is prompted. Like if somebody, hey, Ray, it's lunchtime. Oh, okay, I'm on my way down. At first, he was very regular for activities, but over the past year, he rarely attends. If he does attend a community activity, he has minimal involvement. What is the appropriate level of care for Ray? Stumped you on this one, didn't I?
Assisted living with some additional help.
I like that answer. Assisted living with some additional help. Good answer. Any other answers? Okay, so Ray is this is common. Like, it's okay you don't know the answer to this, because sometimes I don't know either, right? He's that in between. So we'll see in the next slide where it'll be much more obvious that memory care is appropriate. But memory care may or may not be appropriate for Ray. Assisted living with additional support may or may not be appropriate for Ray. He's kind of in that in-between stage. But he's certainly getting to that level where it's not a safety issue per se, but his ability to connect and engage with his environment is declining. So his environment right now is assisted living. And even in assisted living, there's still some level of unstructured independence. And that level of unstructured independence, you can see, is starting to become more challenging for Ray. So in my mind, clinically, I'm thinking, okay, he's doing okay in assisted living. Probably we can get him some additional support, additional check-ins, and he'll do okay there. It may not be optimal, but it will keep him in assisted living at least for a little while longer. But I think the writing's on the wall that memory care is probably going to become the next step for Ray in the near future. And that's maybe what we have. At age 85, he's still in assisted living. But last year, Ray wandered from the facility, indicating he was walking to the university for work to attend class. But now he has a Wander Guard bracelet. He needs full reminders to attend meals, and he needs reminders and assistance to bathe. What is the appropriate care level for Ray? Memory care, right? So that's pretty clear. It's becoming a safety issue. I would add, where are we at? Wander Guard bracelets. I think they are, so Wander Guard bracelet is basically a bracelet that if it passes an alarm threshold in an assisted living community, it will set off an alarm. And so it's to alert the staff that somebody has wandered from the facility. And those can be okay as a bridge. You know, sometimes maybe there's not room in memory care yet, so they get them on the wait list, and we're just trying to kind of keep Ray safe and bring a higher level of awareness. And those are fine as a bridge before memory care. I would never recommend a Wander Guard bracelet as a means to move somebody into assisted living. To say, hey, okay, we'll move mom into assisted living. It may not be appropriate, but we'll do a Wander Guard bracelet just to keep things safe. If that's the case, then they should be in memory care, in my opinion. Because to me, a Wander Guard bracelet is a strong indicator that the assisted living environment is no longer appropriate. All right, so Ray is now 91. He's been in memory care for the past 6 years. He has declining health and is in and out of the hospital. He has uncontrolled diabetes with complications of a foot laceration not healing. He requires 2 staff persons to help transition out of bed to a wheelchair. He is mostly bedbound, and his dementia severity is late moderate to advanced. What is the next appropriate level of care for Ray? Skilled nursing, yeah. So his medical needs and wellness needs are beyond what can be provided in a non-medical setting, such as memory care. So what about paying for care? Yeah, big question, right? So 2 truths and 1 lie about paying for long-term care. So, true or false? There are government programs available to help offset long-term care costs. So who says true? Raise your hand. Who says false? Half true. Half true. Okay, if you say half true, just raise a partial hand. Okay, who says false? Raise your hand. All right, man, such little faith in the federal government. It is actually true. I would more say half true, though. I think you were right. I would give it like a that, yeah. So while it is difficult to find, they do exist. I think the most beneficial program that I've found, and if any of you guys know of other programs that you might have come across, please chime in. I'd be very curious to know. But one is called the Veteran Aid and Attendant Benefit that's offered through the federal government. Whoops. And the Veteran Aid and Attendant Benefit is a monthly pension benefit that provides tax-free payments to veterans who served during wartime. In addition to being available for veterans, single serving spouses and dependent children are also eligible for this benefit. So if you served in the military or your spouse served in the military during a time of conflict, you don't have to have seen conflict, you don't have to have been in theater or overseas, you just have to have been in the military during a time of conflict, then you will qualify for this benefit. I can't remember the dollar amounts off my head exactly, but I want to say it's $1,800 around that per month for the service member, retired service member, and $1,200 per month for the surviving spouse. Interestingly, though, Vietnam is a little bit different. If you served in the military in the early 60s before we actually designated it as a war, I think it was considered a military conflict at that time. If you did not serve, that's the only one I saw. If you weren't actually in theater, like in Vietnam, serving, then you don't qualify for the benefit. So if you were here stateside in the military, and there's like a small window, it's like 1962 to 1964 or something, it's kind of weird. But otherwise, if you served during Vietnam, Korean War, the Gulf War conflicts, you would qualify, World War II, of course, you would qualify for this benefit. There's also benefits through Medi-Cal and supplemental Social Security income. So these are for lower income individuals. Some assisted living facilities may accept Social Security supplemental Social Security income as a sole rental income for the facility, but not in the Bay Area. It's $1,200 a month is what that they're allowed to take as rental income. So you can imagine that a board and care, home or larger facility in the Bay Area, they just couldn't afford to do it. But there are certainly places potentially outside the Bay Area and in different parts of the country where that might be an option. For individuals who are in a skilled nursing facility, once medical insurance benefits have run out and patients on Medi-Cal or SSI, the facility then must accept your Medi-Cal rate as payment. And there are ways that people can get onto Medi-Cal, can appropriately spend down any sort of assets they may have. But you usually need to see an attorney to help you kind of set that up. There's also a program called Medi-Cal Assisted Living Waiver. And this is a new program with the goal of keeping people in lower care settings of assisted living rather than paying for the high cost of a SNF. So you can imagine that if you're on Medi-Cal, Medi-Cal's paying for a SNF because there's no other place for that individual to go, and the state of California is saying, well, wait a second, if they can be in assisted living, that's going to cost us way less, if that's appropriate, than being in a SNF. So it provides the assisted living with greater compensation based on the care needs. And it's currently in a pilot program with very long wait lists, but they are working to expand it. Oh, shoot, I gave you the answer. Darn it, darn clicker. All right, there are government, Medicare will cover the cost of long-term care. So who says true? You saw the Pinocchio, or gave away that. That is false, all right? Now be honest. Who thought, though, that Medicare would cover long-term care costs? Anybody in here? All right, good. That's a very common misconception. And it's usually the adult children. Well, mom's got Medicare, she's fine, we'll be able to pay for assisted living. It doesn't work like that. That's assisted living is non-medical care, okay? So Medicare or other health insurance plans covers medical-based care only. And they will cover up to 100 days of nursing home care. But there are no provisions for medical care, including in-home care. All right, so by process of elimination, because it's 2 truths and 1 lie, we already have 1 truth, 1 lie, you already know the answer to this. With appropriate planning, paying for long-term care is possible. Yes, that is true. So in all cases, it is best to work with a financial planner with expertise in this area. I would highly recommend as you start the long-term care senior community journey is to meet with a financial planner just to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. And there are different options to pay for long-term care. Some might be available to you now or maybe were available in the past. Long-term care insurance is one option. I've seen successful use of reverse mortgages. You have to be careful. There's scams around reverse mortgages, but I have seen good reverse mortgage counselors and really set up a program that works for a senior's family to utilize the equity in their home to then help pay for long-term care costs, not only in a senior community, but maybe for in-home care, for example. And there are also tax breaks and incentives available, so talk with your tax professional about that. All right, so final piece of the agenda here. 3 tips for finding a senior community. Tip number 1, work with a senior placement advisor. So this is a bit of a commercial for a segment of the industry that I work in, is senior placement advising. So a senior placement advisor is a professional that works with seniors and their families to help find appropriate senior living communities. So they're really there to help you navigate answer questions, and really be an expert on the local area of different types of communities. The best way to think about it, a similar kind of metaphor, is it's like a buyer's agent in real estate. You know, when you go to buy a home, you can do it yourself. You don't need a real estate agent, but it's good to have that expert who knows the inventory, who knows what's available, and they can also work on your behalf to find the best deal. Also similar is that a senior placement advisor is compensated by the communities of where the senior may be placed. All right? So that's really important to understand, because within that, there is a potential for a conflict of interest. For example, how do you know this advisor is not just placing me in communities where they have agreements with? And that's a very reasonable question to ask. My general response to that is that among the 400 different communities in Contra Costa, I don't know Contra Costa specifically, but industry-wide, the numbers is about 90% of all senior communities work with senior placement advisors. And the reason why is it's just kind of part of the ecosystem. These senior communities, even the larger ones, don't have huge marketing staffs. They don't have 5, 6 people, spread out through the community trying to, market and share about their services. And so they utilize senior placement advisors to basically help them get residents that are appropriate for their community. So a senior placement advisor should be an expert in the senior living industry. Senior placement advisors in California, there's 0 barrier to entry, meaning you don't need any qualification, you don't need any educational background, you don't need any experience. In fact, many almost even say that in their bio. After 30 years in the restaurant industry, my grandma got dementia and now I want to be a senior placement advisor, right? Kind of scary. Hopefully, sorry, I'm advertising for myself a little bit, but hopefully what I try to bring to this space is a little bit of knowledge and background and experience in the social, cognitive, psychological, and wellness needs of seniors. And fortunately, there are other individuals that have similar or like backgrounds to mine that do have this background and experience. But just for you to be aware that you want to work with someone who does have knowledge and background working with older adults, as I just mentioned. I would be careful working with large online senior care locating services. So there are national online databases where you can go online, put in your information, and a placement advisor will contact you, but they could be anywhere in the country and not really have any expertise or knowledge on Contra Costa County or wherever you may want to go. And probably most importantly, a senior placement advisor should be fully transparent, ethical, and follow best practices. They should be fully transparent about the communities that they're working with, how they're compensated, and that you as the consumer really has the choice and is driving that relationship. So there is an organization called the National Placement and Referral Alliance, the NPRA, that if you're part of the NPRA, you've committed to following ethical guidelines and standards and best practices as a senior placement agent. So you can go on there and look up in their directory and find NPRA members who provide this service, of which I am a member. Establish a realistic budget. AL care is a combination of base rent and then added care needs. So it's important that you recognize that it's not just the base rent, but it's also what care needs might be needed now, and then what care needs might also be needed in the future. You need to factor in increasing care needs and also ask about scheduled rent increases. Some smaller communities, they just add maybe every few years, they change their rent just to keep pace with inflation. Other larger communities, they'll increase rent every year, 5-6%, so you need to be aware of that. Work with a financial planner and determine how long existing assets can pay for care. And if your assets cannot cover the length of care, think about different alternatives. Can you live with family members for a while, or can you maybe hire in-home care for a smaller amount of time to keep you independent in your home longer? So you be kind of creative about mixing and matching different levels of support to help maximize your assets. Step 3, and a tip for finding community. Get a feel for the community before moving in. So consider visiting the community 2 to 3 times at least before committing to moving. I'd also recommending at least trying 1 or 2 different meals. I would say that a lot of assisted living communities, the meals are fabulous. I mean, I love having lunches and stuff there. I don't know if they really step it up when I come, but they're good meals. Talk to other residents. What I do when I visit communities, so I visit communities all the time. Since I've started the We Care Senior Living Advisors, I've been to dozens of different communities, and they all look great. I mean, especially the larger ones, they're all elegant, they're all, they're just very nice. And so you gotta kind of look through that a little bit. And what I recommend doing is actually just sitting back and observing and watching staff interactions. Watch their interactions with different residents. Are they super responsive to a resident's care needs? I'll give you a really positive example I had. I was at a community recently, and it was a memory care community. And this one woman was coming out of her room, and she was kind of confused, a little disoriented, and she kept saying, "I need help, I need help." And I've been in other communities where it's just ignored. That's just whoever, that's just Sarah, and she has dementia, we're just not gonna pay. She always calls for help. Well, the med tech who was down the end of the hall, the med tech, and that's not really his job. His job is to get medicines prepared. He just dropped what he did and headed straight to her and said, "Sarah, what's going on? How can I help you?" Like, to me, that was a very positive sign of staff being empowered to make sure that their residents are taken care of, not "Oh, this isn't my job, that's someone else." So that's an example of just sitting back and observing the interactions and the energy of the environment. How does it feel? How does the energy feel? And that can really go a long way too. If there is a need for a move is immediate, consider a respite move to allow for time to decide a community. So a lot of different communities have respite care where you can stay there for 2 to 4 weeks, and you pay a daily rate. And they take care of you, and that gives a little bit of a buffer as the older resident and the family try to figure out what to do next. All right, so in closing, this was a quote a number of years ago when I had recommended, this was an older adult gentleman with some mild dementia, and he just really was not doing well living at home. It was clear that his in-home care needs, even if we were to hire in-home care, it would be pretty robust, probably would need 24/7. And so we got him into a nice assisted living community. He didn't need memory care at that point. And then I did a follow-up a year later with this resident, older adult. And one of the first things the daughter said to me was like, as soon as Dad moved into the community, it was like, I finally got my dad back. He was active, he was going to meals, he had made friends, he even had established a romantic relationship with one of the residents, and his just whole demeanor. And I have to tell you, when I evaluated him a year later, he was actually doing better from a cognitive standpoint than he was the year before. And that really doesn't happen that often. So long-term care decisions are individual and based on just several factors. There's no right way for each family. It's just you have to look at so many different factors. Decisions should be made in this priority: safety, health, welfare, and quality of life. Discuss, plan, and implement, and try not to make decisions in a crisis mode. Talk to your families about it now. What are your wishes and desires, and make those well-known and communicated to your family members. So I'm happy to entertain some questions if there are. It looks like we have about 10 minutes for questions. And this is my contact information if you ever want to get a hold of me in the future. So Alexa, I have some questions. So Penny's going to come by with a microphone.
I've got a question here on this side.
I'd like to have a little bit more information about the veterans' benefits and how we find out who is eligible, what they're eligible for, what level of care they need in order to get those benefits.
Yeah, actually, thank you for reminding me. So, if you just Google veteran aid and attendant benefits, and I forgot to mention, because part of the description of my promise during this presentation is that we would, I would provide some resources. And so if you would like to grab one of these folders on your way out, I provide a number of different articles and resources, including one article about enhancing independent living and aging in place. If you actually go on my website, wecareseniorlivingadvisors.com, and pull up under the blog, I have an article that kind of repeats what I talked about, 2 truths and 1 lie about paying for in-home care. It's not in here, I didn't provide it in here, but it is on the blog on my website. And it gives, so the reason why I bring that up is there's a couple links that I provide on the veteran aid and attendant benefit. Yeah. On my website, yeah, if you go to the website and look under blogs, you'll see some links. And then you can also just Google veteran aid and attendant benefit and information will come up on that.
We also have that information. We also have that information in the counseling office, a brochure. And this is a topic that's been requested more than once now. So I'm going to look into having someone present on just that, on veterans benefits. So we can have, I mean, I think that's a whole nother 45 minutes we can dedicate to that.
Yeah, that'd be
so
great.
Let me do some back research on that.
Are you familiar with what the regulations are now because of the coronavirus? My husband is in a memory care unit, and even though everybody's been vaccinated and boosted, and everybody who comes to visit has to be vaccinated, I guess, I don't know if they're asking for the booster shots, but I noticed that it's very different now from, of course, many things are. But when I look on Facebook and see the pictures of this particular place, I see pictures of grandchildren being in the social room with grandma and grandpa, and, you know, at holidays, you know, that the family is all out there. Now, they are not allowing any of that to go on, any of that. And I've looked everywhere online, and I don't see where that is a regulation that they have to follow. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, well, so Contra Costa, well, if it's in the Contra Costa County, it'd be Contra Costa County Public Health is one who dictates and they follow the direction of the state. As far as where those different rules, I think would be on the county health webpage. I don't know, Penny, if you have any other ideas where they might find that. But if you also have questions about long-term care facilities, the local ombudsman, which is through Empowered Aging, empoweredaging.org, there are Contra Costa County ombudsmen, and they can direct you to, probably answer those questions and direct you to different resources.
Okay, I'll go to the front on this side of the room.
Hi again. So if we all agree that if you don't have a lot of money, you're stuck at the bottom, you're stuck at the SNFs. There really is no other anything. There's no magic thing to pull out of nowhere unless maybe you're a veteran, correct?
Right, well, and the assisted living waiver through the state of California is trying to change that, where they can use, instead of Medi-Cal just being used for a SNF, they're trying to start to allow it to be used for non-medical assisted living care. So they don't have to go to the SNF. But to your point, if you have low financial resources, there are not a lot of great options for long-term care. I think over here in the blue, Penny, we had a question. We'll get you.
You mentioned the respite option. Under what circumstances would that be appropriate?
Well, I mean, there's lots of different scenarios, but one scenario is, maybe there's a recovery from a hospitalization, or maybe you're getting discharged from a skilled nursing facility, and everybody's kind of like, what do we do? Where does mom go to next? You can use respite care as saying, okay, well, let's put mom, at this nice assisted living community. They provide respite services, so they provide care and support. And it's just for 2 weeks or 30 days. And then that gives us time to then figure out, okay, what is the long-term care plan? So there's no real there's not like a set criteria. Anybody can go into respite care. It's just presuming there's room at different facilities. And a lot of them do oftentimes have room for respite services. But it just gives a little bit of buffer, a little bit of time. So.
I have a question in the back, and then I'm going to take a couple questions from our Zoom and then come back to the live room.
It seems like most of the recommendations about when you move from one level of care to another is based on somebody living by themselves. So somebody living with a spouse will do so many of those things. Of course, they're going to tell you when they have meals. They might monitor their medication and so on. So it doesn't seem really to apply to somebody with a spouse. I have a friend recently who her husband broke his leg walking with a walker. And that was the defining moment. But maybe it should have been much earlier.
Right. I mean, that's a very good point. And the math changes, right, when you have two people versus one.
Right.
But the conversation is still very similar as far as, what is the appropriate level of care? Sometimes that can be provided by the spouse, but then what's the cost to the spouse to be able to provide that care? And so then you have to think about, okay, what are the options here? Is it in-home care? Or sometimes you have one spouse that moves into a community while the other spouse stays at home. Sometimes you have both move at the same time. Sometimes if there's a dementia situation, the spouse will be in dementia care during the day, and then at night will come back to assisted living to be with the spouse. So the math changes on that, but the conversations are still, at least globally, the same as far as what is the appropriate level of care, what is the appropriate level of services for this older resident.
And you brought up something about during the day, it could be different. Does Contra Costa County have an adult daycare center?
There's there's many different, there's a few daycare adult day centers within Contra Costa County. And if you go to choiceandaging.org, they provide a list of all the different programs within the area. This nice lady in the blue here has had her hand up the whole time.
Okay.
Can we get a question from her?
Sure. Can you raise your hand again, lady in the blue? Thank you. I'll be right there. Also, we have a list of the adult day healthcare programs in the counseling office.
Perfect.
Just down the hall. Yeah, I'm coming over. Oh, you got it. Yeah, why don't you go?
I have a question related to diagnosis. The overlap in the situation I'm talking about is some memory loss, etc., but also increasing blindness. Now, would the blindness be considered a medical option for placement?
Well, it can certainly fall under a medical care need that would require services and support. Yeah.
Okay,
And that would be factored into what sort of care that they might need.
Okay, I'm going to do the Zoom questions. So the first question is, what is the average cost per day for a caretaker? What is the average cost per day for a caretaker who works for an agency? And does that caretaker receive benefits?
So that would be a question for the different agency that you work, but the cost usually they're paid on an hourly rate typically, sometimes on a daily rate, and that can range anywhere from $20 to $35, $40 an hour, and correct me if I'm wrong.
North or south of $40.
Yeah, north or south of $40. So, and as far as benefits, I'm not aware that if benefits are provided, and I imagine most do. Yeah, I imagine it depends on the different agency. Yeah.
We have a home care representative here who is actually nodding her head saying $35 to $40 per hour is the cost to the care recipient, and that most professional care, people who work for a professional care agency have some kind of benefits. Okay, second question on Zoom. For memory care, is there a treatment which reverses memory decay other than vitamin-like supplements?
Well, so I would say vitamin supplements fall under that umbrella, that there's unfortunately no treatment that can reverse a progressive condition like dementia. There are certain medications that can slow down the progression of cognitive decline. And there's really no vitamin or supplement on the market that, well, I'll just say don't waste your money buying stuff you see on TV. So, any more Zoom? That was a Zoom questions?
That was it for Zoom.
Perfect. Sir?
On the memory thing, what about brain exercises that can help to deal with the neuroplasticity changes?
Yeah, good question. So there's not really any one single exercise. I mean, you can do crosswords until your fingers bleed, and it's really not going to make a whole bit of difference. But if games, puzzles are something you enjoy doing, then that's certainly something that at the very least are not going to hurt, and they could potentially help. But more importantly, it's about what about your overall quality of life, your overall activities. If all you do is crosswords, but you're isolated, you have a poor diet, you maybe drink too much alcohol, you don't drink enough water, doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to help. But if you are an individual that exercises, you eat a heart-healthy diet, you keep social, around people, enjoy activities, and you happen to enjoy doing puzzles and games and activities, then I think all four of those factors really potentially optimize brain health and reduce risks for later onset of cognitive decline.
Over there.
And then we had one in the back again.
I was married for almost 30 years to somebody who served in the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
He passed in 2000, but we were married for almost 30 years. Would I be eligible for his veterans benefits after a divorce?
Yeah, I would think so, but you would need to talk with a specialist that deals with that veteran aid and attendant benefit. But I would say that there's definitely worth investigating because there could be some funds available to help for care costs. So yeah, definitely check it out.
And you had another question back here?
Do you have any books to recommend that, for instance, we have a few. One is called the Memory Bible with exercises, brain exercises, and just wondering if there's something that's really up to date that you think provides good suggestions.
Well, as far as like brain health is concerned or strategies, the Memory Bible is a great book by Gary Small, and he has an updated version actually. I think that was maybe within this year or last year. But there's other books as far as for loved ones that maybe have a family member with dementia or memory loss. So the most common book that I recommend is called The 36-Hour Day, and that's a really great book. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're going to close it up. Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for coming today and bringing your fabulous questions. Dr. Freitag, thank you so much for your time today. And also, Dr. Freitag with his organization We Care have refreshments for you in the back. So stick around and get some snacks. Thanks very much, everyone.